Well. How long is the lag? Let's find out. Nothing so far. Right, this looks better. No, it doesn't. Doom. Oh, here we go. There is something. Can I hear myself? Yes, I can hear myself. That's good. Wonderful. I hope you can hear me as well, and I hope you can see me. That's sort of like the question that I can't answer, but we will find out. Hey, Mike, how you doing? And Jin's there. How you doing, buddy? Let's see. Oh, and there he is. Mr. Hayward, back as a Gistal and not a Demidrach. I just have to figure out what's going on here. And yes, Mike, I'm good. Mostly, I'm very tired, so we'll see how long this will go. I did just finally do the reader's personality tag thing you tagged me in. So there's that. And I just finished a very bad book about Mormonism. Not the best one I've read. And I've read, well, a lot of them, is what I'm saying. Hey, Thornall, how you doing? So are you saying the camera is blurry, or are you saying that it's very hot where you are? Because from people that live further south or east from where I am right now, I've heard that it's very, very hot. So let me know whether it's a camera thing or it's you doing jokes. Hello, Chadia, how you doing? Well, let's get this whole thing started. Cheers. Yeah, I've also decided that I guess from now on I'll just make only videos where I insult people. I just checked on the video I did on Thursday. Was it Thursday? I think it was Thursday. Yeah, that I put out on Thursday is like about 1,300 views at this point, which is insane, and has gained me something like 16 new subscribers. So I guess I need to be more insulting. I do always have a big light shining on me. It's called a halo. It comes from my sanctity. Now there's a ring light behind the camera, and there's still some light on the side because we still have some daylight left in even in my weird I can't call it a cave, can I? Right? It's top floor. Good question. Let me figure out if I can do something with this. Do I have wait, I was wondering if I have something to maybe clean the lens of the camera, but I don't know what to do about that. This is very, very unprofessional, and I hope none of you get very sick if I just use my t-shirt to polish the camera lens. I hope this makes things better. Otherwise, I don't know what to do. I am stumped for options at this point. Maybe the camera is just dying. Who knows? Or there's some weird new AI filter thing that I didn't know is on it, and I forgot to disable because obviously everything is AI now, apparently. And I already clicked away like 3 different buttons for that. I hope there's no steam around me. No, I don't know, but it is still relatively warm around me as well. So I'll guess we'll have to live with that. Perfect. Well, yeah, sorry I wasn't there last month. The last like 4 weeks now, 5 weeks have been very, very intense. Like I went to like three festivals. One of them was unplanned, and turns out that makes it very, very difficult to be around on a Saturday to do a or anything. Because on the one Saturday where I wasn't at a festival, I was at a local town fair in like a village relatively close to where I live, which was really weird. Yeah, it cooled down this week here as well. Like it rained earlier today, and it rained bunch the last couple of days, which is good. Like, let's be clear, Germany needs a lot of rain at the moment. I mean, all of Europe needs a lot of rain at the moment. Also, one of the more fun things, because we have, Germany stopped having nuclear power a while ago. Uh, I mean, the far right is very much pro Russian gas, because of course it is. And why is there a fucking fly? Anyway, sorry, I'm trying not to get too distracted by that monster. Anyway, my point is, so the far right, the AfD, is obviously for burning more Russian gas, because they're very much obviously aligned with the Kremlin and with Putin, and probably financed by Russia and so forth. But everyone else on the conservative and liberal, conservative, whatever neoliberal side is, we need to do more nuclear and stop fucking around with all of this like renewable stuff, because that's woke and gay and soy and whatever, right? And yeah, turns out that once your rivers run really, really low, you run out of cooling water for your nuclear power plants, and everyone who has, solar panels is actually still happy, which was funny. Oh, fuck. Yeah, 40 is really bad. We had that like several times this year, and yeah, it's not good. Like last week at the festival was really bad, like Summer Breeze open air. It was like 36, and like, I mean, you're on an open air festival, right? There's like no shadow whatsoever. There's no shade anywhere, and you're standing there from like the first bands I went to see usually started playing at noon, and the last one that wanted to see stopped playing at 3 a.m. So it's, that's at like 15 hours in front of a stage. It was like physically really, really stressful. Yeah, it's probably I guess I have to join the Space Marines now. Yeah, no, I try not to get into the Fahrenheit thing. I think like 38, 39-ish is 100 freedom units, and that's about it. But yeah, how have you been in your new French exile, or new home, or whatever you want to call it? Is it going well? Well, the difference is, Mike, you're in the US, and our former demi-dragon now Gistal moved from the US to France recently, so he kind of has to deal with the you know uh, normal system of Celsius and stuff. The Space Wolves, no, I suspect it's the other ones. The Space Wolves, that's the ones who actually have like a special sort of like opening at in their armor, so they can be wolf-like and lick their own balls, right? That's really important for their power armor, I think. I haven't played Warhammer, is what I'm saying. Ooh, so you are going back to the Earth of the New Sun. Well, in this case, not the Earth, but the Book of the New Sun. Um, okay. But did you finish? Did you finish Claw, or did you just abandon it in the middle because you were so enraged by Severian raping Jolanta. Oh, spoilers for a 40-year-old book, 45-year-old book. Anyway, no, 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 no. I don't care about these, whether it's a metric or the imperial system. It's the one that you grow up with and that you can sort of like imagine in your head, because it has to be somewhat intuitive, and what's intuitive is like what you grow up with. At the end of the day, it's like I grew up in a metric system, so that's what I do, and dividing by 10 sounds reasonable, and all your pounds and ounces and pounds, shillings, and ounces don't make sense for me, and gallons and stuff like that. Oh yeah, I saw that with the shock glove thing. That was insane. It's so stupid. Um, Especially if you look at like the advertisement material that the company that produces those shock gloves, and it's like, yeah, the great thing is you can shock someone and it won't even show up on like surveillance cameras. Isn't that great? And I'm like, well, I'm glad you're saying the quiet part out loud, but I don't know, motherfuckers. Ooh, the sacking of Constantinople. That's fun. Have you read Baudolino? Because that also has the sacking of Constantinople in it, among other things. It also has the Third Crusade and the death of Barbarossa in it, because it's an Umberto Eco novel, and it also has Prester John in it, and weird creatures, and stuff like that. Somehow I always feel like you have already read the entirety of Book of the New Sun, Chadia, and are rereading it, but I might just be confusing you with someone else, or might just be confused myself. So there's that. Um, and I don't know how far 11 chapters in Claw is. Claw is the second one. I know that. And so I assume the 11 chapters in, they have been at the mine, right? Of course, they have to have been at the mine, because you already had the thing with Thekla. So you must be somewhere between that and their attempts to get to or out of the House Absolute. Somewhere around that must be like 11 chapters in, I assume. Dude, you don't have to feel bad for not watching a 4-hour video. I'm sure you have better things to do. Yes, Umberto Eco wrote Baudolino, which is a very fun book, if you haven't read it. It's the story of Baudolino, who is a weird guy from northern Italy who accidentally stumbles into the path of Frederick Barbarossa, and then hangs out with Barbarossa, and sort of like he's sort of like the I don't know how to say that. Like he just is part of like all the weird shit happening in the 12th century and beginning of the 13th century. It's a Forrest Gump of the 12th and 13th century, I guess. You could, in a sense, but it's his autobiography, and it's really fun. And so yeah, he forges the letter from Prester John to motivate Barbarossa to actually do something, and then their goal is to return the Grail to Prester John, who really should have it, and not someone in Italy. The Grail in that situation being a wooden cup that Baudolino's father made. So there's all kinds of stuff. Also, smoking weed with students at the university in Paris, and besieging and destroying Milan at least once, possibly twice, discovering the corpses or the mummies of the three magi, and it's an Umberto Eco novel. Lots of stuff happening. I can highly recommend it. I hope all of you read it, and then probably most of you will be baffled because it's a lot of like inside baseball in there. I mean, looking at like the recent news, I feel like the air is getting very thin for Sam Altman. I don't know how long he'll be able to keep going at it, but I mean, obviously, the market can stay irrational much longer than you can stay solvent. We all know that, but yeah. Ah, okay. So you DNF'd it in Claw before. I can tell you that stuff gets really strange and weird and all kinds of other stuff later on. So and while he doesn't he never becomes, like a feminist icon or anything, but the overt sort of like gruesome sort of misogyny is less, recedes a bit because of other stuff happening. So he can get less he still remains smug as fuck though. I mean, because obviously he remembers everything. But Claw has some really crazy shit going on later on with like witches summoning ghosts and it's really strange stuff. What's a series that intimidates you, Thornall? Book of the New Sun, or well, I mean, the other ones are the Sword of the Lictor, the Shadow of the Torturer, and the Citadel of the Autarch. So the entire thing is well titled, I guess. Thornall, no one is well enough read for or widely enough read for Umberto Eco. It's a bit like Thomas Pynchon. You read it and you will not get everything as long as you get that usually is enough. And I think Name of the Rose is very easy to read in that you can just like have fun with like a nice sort of like whodunit crime fiction and ignore all the other stuff around it. And if you realize that Jorge of Burgos, the blind librarian, is obviously a Jorge Luis Borges joke, then you're already on the winning side. Just as there is a Borges joke in Book of the New Sun, because of course there is. True. You don't get much from the witches in that book, in Book of the New Sun. They're just there. Never fully explained what they do, but there's other weird stuff going down. Book of the New Sun can be intimidating, but the fun thing with Book of the New Sun is you can just read it and ignore all the other stuff and have like a really fun, weird, almost sword and sorcery-esque fantasy story with Severian, the torturer apprentice, being kicked out of his tower because he does something that he's not supposed to do, and being sent as being sent to a different town to be its lictor and basically judge and executioner, and yeah, traveling there, and then other stuff happens that's not supposed to happen, and then he has more adventures, and he tells you from of his adventures, and those involve wars and possibly aliens and demons and all kinds of crazy shit, also possibly dinosaurs, and he may be tempted by the devil. It's a bit complex, and he's totally not Jesus. Hey Bedivere, how you doing? So yeah. Anyway, I did finish the Felicity Complex by August Clarke, and it's a very interesting, fun book. It ends very weirdly, and yeah, it's like the premise is that in the 1970s, this rich Christian billionaire entertainment mogul, he's totally like not patterned after anyone we ever knew or whatever, right? Like he built this survival bunker for like the definitely coming nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union, with the evil communists, and for like very rich customers, so they can be safe there and wait out, the nuclear holocaust. And for that, he needs, well, basically cloned uh, women, or they're built out of some vague stem cell, whatever magic. Yeah, basically cloned, whatever, who are there to serve those customers, and then stuff happens, and they get stuck in that bunker without, the bombs falling, and so it has like a weird, almost like Fallout, sort of like vibe to it, and then it gets, very funny and very strange, and at the end, lots of gore and blood and stuff, because the revolution does come. Like the communists do show up. They're just not like, from Russia or North Korea, but fun book. I do recommend it. It has a lot to say about, gender roles, because obviously, but it has like a very sarcastic tone to it, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, and I guess the next book that I'm going to read is The Jakarta Method, because I like to suffer from time to time. I don't know if any of you have read The Jakarta Method or have heard of it, but yeah, it's an important book about what the CIA did in Indonesia. Hey, Volcatronic. See, hey, Volcatronic, how you doing? Yeah, I do understand that, Thornell, and I do feel that need to understand stuff. But with authors like Pynchon or Echo, for me, it's you just at some point you just have to understand that they have a head start. Umberto Eco had a head start. He was already a professor for medieval literature and philosophy by the time he was starting to write novels, right? Like I cannot catch up to that guy. So it is what it is. Yeah, that is also true, Volcatronic. That Gene Wolfe did in fact help create the Pringles machine. There is that rumor, but it seems to be just a rumor that the Pringles logo, the guy with the mustache, is in fact patterned after Gene Wolfe, because Gene Wolfe did have a bit of a mustache. But that seems to be just an urban legend. But yeah, he was he was part of the patent holder for the Pringles machine. Oh yeah, very depressing book, a very enraging book, but I think it's an important one. Yeah, I'm good. Just a bit tired, but I'm slowly coming back to life after all of those heavy metal festivals and stuff, and slowly embarking on the next big research project, because obviously I need to do something now that the AI video is out. So it's Mormons all the way down. So yeah, I finished the Felicity Complex by August Clarke, and then I read The Mormonizing of America by Stephen Mansfield, and it's not a good book, because Stephen Mansfield is a bit of a piece of shit, I think. By which I mean he's a conservative evangelical pastor, but I figured it might be interesting to see what someone from that group of people thinks about the Mormons, because they might be heretics or something, and but it's not a very deep book, and I feel maybe I've read too many books about Mormons at this point. We'll see. So yeah, and I'm gonna read the Jakarta Method. I also want to read the Nerd Reich by Gil Duran. Came out like on Tuesday or Thursday. I don't know if I'll find much new stuff in there because I feel like I think, and I've obviously listened to his podcast and everything, and I suspect he's mostly sort of like drawing from the same sources that I have used for the AI video. I know he's definitely taken from Quinn Slobodian. I'm pretty sure he's also referencing people like Jacob Silverman, who wrote Gilded Rage and so forth. But yeah, the Nerd Reich about technofascism, fascism, um, came out as I said, like last week. The Magic Mountain. I see that's one of those books where I mean, I read it earlier this year, and I think what's interesting is how hard it is to understand the Magic Mountain's references like today if you're not, you know, relatively well read and well versed in early 20th century German, in particular, history, cultural history, and so forth. Because like the whole point is sort of like the inertia of or like the paralysis of the German bourgeoisie and its inability to actually make any choices or anything, and everything is just about pretense and so forth, and how that is part of what leads to World War One in a lot of ways. So that's interesting, but because Thomas Mann, the author, is obviously part of that specific cultural background, that highly educated bourgeoisie, he puts in so much stuff that is basically just signaling to that specific, you know, class, that unless you know that kind of stuff, you're kind of fucked. Like the German book. I don't know if English translations do the same thing, but the German version, the original, has like an entire chapter written in French, and yeah, if you if you don't know French, you're kind of fucked in that situation, and because there is no translation or like footnotes or anything, it's just like, well, here you go. This conversation is in French, and it goes over several, you know, it's an entire chapter almost. Like, Dune is dope. No, Dune is about dope. That's a big difference. Now that sounds interesting. What Truman biography is that? Because like, when did Mormons try to take over cities? I mean, obviously, in the 19th century, you have the whole situation around Kirtland and the expulsion or like extermination order in Missouri, and then obviously them in Nauvoo in Illinois. But that's like all 1830s, 1840s. So I'm somewhat surprised that it comes up in the Truman biography. Hey, Britton. No, no, I am. Yeah, I kind of realized that I should probably do this now, right now. So I only set it up yesterday, and that's it. I do kind of like Gilderan. He sometimes comes across as a bit intense, and that's me saying that. But yeah, so but yeah, I'm definitely going to read it, and I think it's worthwhile because I suspect he's going to sum up all of these things, and you know, he has read The Sovereign Individual, and I have not done that because I value at least some scraps of my sanity. Well, that's an interesting question. Now, if I assume you're reading it in English, is the conversation that uh, Paul Castorp has with Madame, whatever her name is, the one that he's desperately in love with. Is that conversation in French in the English translation? Did they leave it in French? I mean, obviously you could read it because I know you speak French, but or has it been just like fully flattened into English? In the I think the chapter's called Walpurgisnacht, but I the one around Carnival, where he borrows her the pen from her. Ah, interesting. See, in German, those are just like in French, and the rest is in German. And like I had French in high school, and so I could more or less make my way through that thing, but it was tough. And I suspect a lot of people reading this in German right now are very much lost because no, you know, French is no longer sort of like the number one sort of like third language or a second language you learn in high school. So I don't know. um, yes, Jin. See, that's one of those things that is really interesting if you read Muskism by Ben Turnoff and Quinn Slobodian. And when they sort of like look at what Musk and other tech Silicon Valley companies are sort of like doing with like the defense sector and so forth, and what they are basically offering. And Musk, Tarnov and Slobodian call it sovereignty as a service, which is exactly you basically take over more and more vital sort of like state capacity and turn it into, well, something that one private company offers and is often vertically integrated, right? Like Elon Musk provides the rockets that shoot stuff into space. He provides the satellites. He provides all of these things that like it's all in like one hand. And if Elon Musk decides that the state doesn't need this anymore, the US is kind of fucked. So yeah, World War III will not happen unless those people wanted to, I guess. As for the Mormons, the LDS Church is in fact the wealthiest organized religion in the world. The LDS Church is richer than wealthier than the Catholic Church, sort of. It's a bit hard to define because the Catholic Church obviously owns a lot of like art and stuff that is famously hard to like judge, like value judge in a lot of ways. Was like how much are these things worth? Who knows, right? But because of the LDS Church is mostly invested in stocks and stuff, they have amassed an insane amount of money. They can vastly outspend any other religion at the moment. So that's an interesting aspect of the LDS Church in particular. You're right that a lot of like stuff, especially like the temple rituals and stuff, are very much sort of like taken from Freemasonry. Obviously, at the time, Joseph Smith, once he's in Illinois, he gets introduced to Freemasonry and becomes very enamored with it. That is certainly something that happens in most like the 1840s. Whereas in when you read the Book of Mormon, which I have done several times for reasons, there is that whole sort of like section around the Galliant and robbers or the secret combinations, and that is very much or can be tied to or seen as inspired by a huge scandal. Like I keep forgetting the name. There was a murder or disappearance of a critic of the Freemasons in upstate New York in the 1820s. Big ado, big scandal at the time, and that is sort of like the inspiration there because there was a lot of like anti-Freemason sentiment in U.S. politics in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s. Like for a long time there, that was like the first sort of like third party in US politics was the Know Nothing Party. And they were like very much tied. Well, they're also like very nativist and anti-immigrant and all of that kind of stuff. But they were also very much an anti-Freemason party, the anti-Masonic party. That's sort of like where they started out. And that is obviously tied back to the weird connection, quick across thing to another of my hobbies, which is I shouldn't say that. I was going to say another of my interests, which is anti-Semitism. Interest sounds better than hobby in this regard, right? Because there is this whole thing that happens in, the French Revolution happens, and then there is he called Abbé Joël, a French guy who writes an insane book about how the Jesuits, together with the Freemasons and the Jews, are basically behind. No, not the Jesuits. Joel was a Jesuit, I think. I'm kind of slowly confusing it, but like it's the Freemasons and the Jews did in fact start the French Revolution, and it gets picked up by a British author, Scottish author, who probably copies Joel, and that's sort of like where this really strong anti-Masonic sentiment then gets just sort of like pulled over into like US politics, where they're tied to a lot of that kind of stuff. That's also the era where the Bavarian Illuminati kind of happen and are tied into all of that as well. Obviously, the Bavarian Illuminati, the original Bavarian Illuminati, were pretty fucking rad. They did cool shit, like provide abortions and plotted to overthrow all monarchies. They were pretty cool in that regard. But so there is this weird climate of like conspiracy theories that then obviously fester in US politics all the way until today. And if you've ever read Richard Hofstadter's The Paranoid Style in American Politics, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Yeah, okay, yeah. The Missouri thing is, and that to be fair, like so the Mormons, like the LDS Church, or the Mormons at that time, right? They call themselves Church of Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ from the beginning on, but they're called Mormons by others. So that's sort of like where there is this thing that Mormon is not like a self-description. They start out in upstate New York, I think Palmyra or thereabouts, and then they move to Kirtland, Ohio, and then they move to start another settlement in Missouri. And there's all kinds of conflicts, and partly they're because they're weird, and partly it's because of people in Missouri being weird. There's also like the level of politics there that this is all the lead up to the Civil War. So Missouri at the time is, let me think, is not a slave holding, not a slave state, but hasn't decided yet. So there is politics around slavery, and Mormons at the time are very clearly anti-slavery. They're like, I know that the racial politics get really weird later on, but at the time they're not exactly fans of slavery. So them moving into Missouri is seen as sort of like tipping the scale within Missouri in those politics, and that leads to like all kinds of like fights with neighbors and stuff like that, and they're prevented by force from voting. Then there is the famous Haun's Mill massacre, where like a bunch of other non-Mormons just basically burn down Haun's Mill and kill everyone there, including children and so forth. A lot of ugly shit happens, and what's his name? I want to say Wilfer, but his surname is Boggs, right? He's governor of Missouri, and he puts out the extermination order that all Mormons need to leave the state of Missouri or need to be exterminated, which is the only time that any U.S. state has ever sent out an extermination order against an entire religion. And Missouri rescinded that in 1976. So yeah, LDS or Saints are still very. This is not ancient history, even though it should be, because it took for fucking ever to to stop that. Like The priesthood ban against black members of the Mormon Church did not hold as long as the extermination order for against Mormons in Missouri. That's crazy, right? And so yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, they got kicked out of a lot of cities. Oh, I need to read Nova Swing. I've only read Light, but I read his last one, his latest one. He's nominated for a Booker Prize for that one, I think, which would be really neat if he would actually win it, especially for the end of everything, because that's one weird book. Well, you win with that lingua franca for now. I suspect that Spanish is definitely on the rise. I don't know about different dialects of Chinese, but I suspect English might be slowly on the retreat. Let's put it that way. US foreign policy is not helping the spread of English at the moment. Yeah, the Persian is the Frenchman of the Orient. I remember that one. The problem is it's hard to stop Musk from playing with space because he is obviously already doing that. He's already polluting the entire low Earth orbit, and that's well, that's a thing we let happen. Let's put it that way. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, if it's not originally written in English, then why go for an English translation if you can find a French one? Oftentimes those might actually be better, depending on from which language they come. I know, for example, that I mean, Umberto Eco famously spoke both German and French and English, and it was famous for having very, very concrete ideas of how his books were supposed to be translated, and did get into fights with his own translators, explaining why he wanted a specific word chosen and stuff like that. But there are, authors where, like, if you translate something from, say, Spanish or Italian or for like any of the other Romanic languages into French makes more sense than translating it into English, I guess. Indo-European, yes. Yeah, Chad. Yeah, the Catholic Church. That's the point. With the Catholic Church, it's kind of hard to guess because they obviously the Catholic Church has stakes in owns shares of several large industry compounds companies like famously I think Fiat and some other Italian defense stuff. But a lot of it is you know all kinds of churches and artworks and stuff like that, and those are hard to estimate. Whereas because the LDS Church stuff is all in stocks and shit, they have to file tax reports, and they have to actually explain how much they own and that kind of stuff. Whereas with the Catholic Church, they go like, well, we evaluate our holdings here at this, and that's kind of where you are. But with that, but like, wonder if that will change if say the AI bubble pops, and there is a stock crash. If that means that the Catholic Church is richer again, because turns out This turns out all of those churches are not rendered, but actually exist. I mean, yeah, the Freemasons are, of course, a real thing. We have a branch here in my city. A friend of mine was I actually joined them for a while. I don't know if he's still a member, but there's a lot of interesting stuff happening around Freemasons. There's a really good book by what's her name? Something something Jacobs. Martha? I would have to look it up. Um, it's one of those early Enlightenment, radical Enlightenment authors, which looks at like how the Freemasons in particular were one of the sort of like avenues through which radical Enlightenment ideas spread through Europe during the 18th century. And so I just can't remember. It's not, I think it's called the Radical Enlightenment, one of those. I would have to look it up. Give me a second. Really good book, highly recommended. I'm sure it's one of the sources that Ada Palmer used for the Terra Ignota series. I mean, obviously, she's a historian of the Renaissance, so this makes sense. Margaret Jacob, that's her name. Margaret Jacob, and I think the first one was called the Radical Enlightenment. She has a later one which is called the Secular Enlightenment. But yeah, this idea that like Freemasons were instrumental in spreading Enlightenment ideas through Europe is definitely one that at least a part of sort of like the people that do history of ideas still adhere to. No, no. Anti-Semitism has been around for a long time. Like years ago, I made a video on it. I don't know if you've seen that, Bedivere. It's like it's the first time I made like one of those like 3 hour videos on like anti-Semitism and how it kind of shows up in a lot of like epic fantasy. Um, so my interest in Mormonism has been around since 2024, I think. Yeah, 2024, I think. You remember when I think it was like was it Wired made that wrote that one I had that one article on Brandon Sanderson and everyone got mad at like how mean that guy was to Sanderson for you know claiming that Sanderson's religion, Mormonism, and the concept that in Mormonism you might actually end up ruling planets because that's kind of sort of like the idea of progression in Mormon theology, that you become a god yourself and can rule planets. That might be something that has inspired Brandon Sanderson's world building in stuff like the Stormlight Archives and shit. And everyone got mad at him and was like, "Oh, how dare you to be so mean to poor Brandon Sanderson?" I'm like, well, I'm sure multimillionaire Brandon Sanderson doesn't need your pity, and you don't need to attack like a staff writer for Wired that gets probably a couple $1,000 per month if he's lucky, right? But and I got really mad at that, and I made a video about it, and then people got mad at me, and then I was like, well, I'm gonna show you motherfuckers, and I started research, and I have this large, and I wanted to do that Mormonism video, and then I even started recording it, and Yeah, then I got mad at everyone on YouTube calling book talk anti-intellectual because it's not, and people didn't know what anti-intellectualism is. And then I made a video about that and said, like, anti-intellectualism is the product of an ongoing campaign of the far right, the Christian right in particular, and parts of the hardcore libertarian groups that have dismantled the U.S. education system systematically since the 1960s. And people told me, no, 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 there's anti-intellectualism on the left as well. I'm like, well, obviously, because that stuff exists everywhere. But like right now, the one that is to blame for why everything is fucked, that's right-wing anti-intellectualism. And then I figured I'll just do that. And then I made a video about anti-intellectualism. It was like, I don't know, 3 hours long. And then I got mad at people for not understanding AI. And then, I spent a year working on that AI video. So the Mormonism video has been pushed around. And now that the AI video is done, I'm getting back to all the stuff that I did for the Mormonism video. And I already read like 20 books on this on the subject. So I'm just refreshing my memory. So, I may not be an expert on Mormonism, but I've read like 3 biographies of of Joseph Smith and 2 of Brigham Young and 1 of Joseph Smith the third, no, Joseph F. Smith. That's the one. And the fourth, the president around the beginning of the 20th century, the one who came up with the baptizing the dead and stuff like that. And I read a biography of David O. McKay, who was president from the 1950s to the 1970s. And I read a biography of Ezra Taft Benson, who was a massive piece of shit and very supportive of the John Birch Society, and contemplated was in the running to be, well, running mate for George Wallace, the guy with segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And yeah, I so yeah, the Mormonism thing goes way back. And my plan is to make a video on Mormonism and Mormonism's theology and history and so forth, and then make individual videos for a selected number of Sanderson novels to show how his Mormonism does influence each of these specific novels. And then I'll make a final video on, Sanderson as a person, not necessarily as a person, but like the Sanderson project, media project, and the stuff that goes around that, like the not manipulation, but instrumental, like exploitation of fandom and stuff like that, because I think it's worthwhile talking about all of that. And that's the plan for the next, I don't know how many months or years. I hope I'll be quicker because I just need to refresh the Mormonism stuff. I mean, I started recording these videos in like autumn 2025, winter 2025. I remember recording them in my room with the window open because then everything was cold enough that the camera didn't overheat. So yeah, that's the Mormonism project. Yeah, the LDS Church itself, it's complicated. Well, I mean, the word of wisdom does only says you're not allowed to drink hot drinks, which they interpret as caffeine. It doesn't say anything about you're not allowed to sell hot drinks. And we know that when you read diaries and stuff from the 19th century, like Brigham Young was drinking strawberry wine and shit like that. Um, I think it might be worth to start with sacrificing the new federal bank chair. I think that's a good way to start. I don't know. Scott Besson obviously knows nothing, but I like to see him suffer. It's interesting to see him struggle to explain everything because this guy does in fact actually know where everything going on in like U.S. politics is bad for finances and stuff like that. He's already in fucking purgatory, so why not leave him there? A fun fact with Brit sounding American, British English is in fact the more specific development. If you go back into like the early 19th century, it's British English did much more sound like American English, and then British English, like the BBC style English that we sort of like think of as English, British English. That's a specific development away from American English and not the other way around, which is one of those weird things that you know you don't think about. German is very different from English and very complex. Let me tell you that. The number 33, that is true. Yeah, I mean that's true. Like, I mean, the interesting thing with like Freemasonry, the way it started, is that you have a lot of these sort of like groups like Freemasons, but also all kinds of other sort of like craftsmen's associations for all kinds of stuff. And a lot of that is sort of like mutual aid and support societies in like the 17th and 18th century, right? Where you have people that all have the same trade and they exchange sort of like trade secrets. They help each other out. If one person is, they're like the precursors to stuff like health insurance and stuff like that, right? Like if one mason is injured, then the others will pool their money to support him until that mason is sort of like able to work again and stuff like that. So a lot of these social elements are tied into these different guilds, and the Freemasons in particular. And I'm not an expert on Freemason history. I know there's books on the subject. I haven't read them, but they become so that they add this mystical stuff and they have staying power that other groups have not, because a lot of the other ones also have all kinds of occult weird shit. My favorite ones are, of course, the magical horseman's word, which is something that Terry Pratchett brings up with Jason Ogg, the blacksmith in the witches books, right? He is obviously he tells Nanny Ogg the magical horseman's word, which is the basically just threatening the horse with violence, and then it stands still so he can shoe the horse. But the actual magical horseman's word is was a once again a sort of like secret society of um, horse keepers. How to describe the word there? In Scotland in the late 18th century, because what happened is that during the 18th century, agriculture changed a bit, and the large sort of Percheron and the those massive horses that we think of as your basic agriculture like plow horses, right? These massive horses, they only are like a relatively new breed, or they only spread to like northern England and Scotland during the 18th century. And before that, everything was done either with cows or with ponies. And if you've ever actually dealt with one of those massive horses, they are so much stronger than you as a human. I mean, even a pony is pretty fucking strong compared to a human. You need a lot of a lot of strength to keep your fucking Shetland pony in in order. But for that, you needed techniques to actually deal with these massive horses, and that's a certain level of like secret knowledge or trade knowledge that only a small group of people had, and they banded together with in that society they called the magic horseman's word or secret horseman's word, one of those. And they had like if you wanted to join them, they had like rituals where you had to kiss a goat skull, the whole fucking 9 yards. So they were famed for very very debauched like drinking. I mean, it's Scotland, and they start out with kissing a goat skull. What do you expect will happen next, right? Like, so they were famed or infamous in that regard. And so yeah, and for whatever reason, the Freemasons have survived that, possibly because they opened up for sort of like the more intellectual side of things, whereas your professors of philosophy, medicine, and whatnot, natural science, did not necessarily want to hang out with a bunch of drunken Scottish farm workers, I guess. But yeah, now that's a question there, Apollo. Now, I want. I just said the Nerd Reich by Gil Duran. That one I was still looking for. But no obligations. To something like Libro FM because they're the better audiobook service anyway. No DRM, and they're tied to bookstore.com, so you can select a local bookstore that gets a percentage of your sales. So yeah, everyone, if you're not tied to Audible for exclusives or whatever, why not use Libro FM in the future? Um, It does, but if you're all conspiracism does end in anti-Semitism. That is very true. I don't know if you've read Warrant for Genocide by Norman Cohn. It's a very good book. That sort of like Norman Cohn's medievalist. He does a lot of like on medieval and millenarian conspiracies and panics and stuff like that. Really good author in that regard. But he obviously also was a obviously a soldier during World War II, and he was part of the sort of like Allied soldiers because he was already like an academic at the time. Um, that did interviews with German soldiers and generally Germans after World War II about their beliefs and so forth. And he wrote Warrant for Genocide, which is a history of the protocols of the Elders of Zion. So he basically looks at sort of like the genesis of that specific text, and it's a really good book. It's very much the source that Umberto Eco took for the Prague Cemetery, which is very much sort of like about a fictitious guy who writes of the um, secret protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is obviously a connection of all kinds of prior documents and stuff like that. Anti-Masonic ones and a tract against Napoleon III, which that kind of stuff, and it all gets put together, possibly on behalf of the Okrana, and then spread via Sergei Nilus, who is a really weird Russian mystic, and then becomes the thing that it becomes, and then it's very much debunked as a fraud in 1920, and everyone still believes it's real. So very interesting book. But if I don't know if I know more about Mormonism than you, but I've read a lot of books on it, and I've read the Book of Mormon like 3 times. It's not a good book. The administrative bloat is definitely real, but that's been around for a long time, and that's not a progressive thing. That's a capitalism thing. That has nothing to do with any sort of like underlying ideologies. That's just, well, I mean, except for capitalism, of course. I mean, Britain, you're in Oklahoma, and as far as I know, Oklahoma is prop. Wasn't Oklahoma like has like either the last or the second to last, like in very much in the absolute bottom of like education results when it comes to the US. I think I've read something like that, but you can obviously gainsay me there. I know it was either Tennessee or one of the I think it was Tennessee that has really, really improved its literacy standards and stuff recently over the last couple of years by heavily investing in public schools and teachers and stuff, which turns out does actually help. When have I said kill my political enemies? I mean, I don't know. I don't think it is illegal to fail students, but if you tie your teacher's salary and evaluation and so forth to the number of students they don't fail or how many students they pass, that creates what you might call an incentive to not ever fail anyone. It's There is this law that whenever a metric becomes a target, it's no longer a good metric. It's called Goodhart's law, something like that. And in a lot of ways, that has been applied to a lot of different systems in the education system, all kinds of other aspects. And it unfortunately holds. Like, obviously, the goal should be to not to make sure that every student actually passes. But if you go like, well, you failed like 5 students, clearly you're a bad teacher. It's like, no, there might be other things there, and that's certainly part of it. But I'm not an expert on the U.S. education system because I've only read like 2 or 3 books on the subject. I'm sorry, you wouldn't know Marxist indoctrination if it hit you. I mean, the real books, at least writing on paper is coming back because if you want to test people's writing ability and reading ability, and everyone is just using LLMs these days, how do you do exams? You do them by actually having people write in longhand on paper, which I find interesting because there are, benefits to writing in longhand that are go beyond anything else, like just cognitive benefits to writing in longhand. So that part is definitely coming back in part at least. Neil Stephenson recently had a good blog on that, and I'm sorry, Carl. Like, I try to not be too judgmental or anything. No, none of your school systems are Marxist. Marx has never written anything about school systems. You can't have a Marxist school system. It's bullshit. I don't know who told you that, and I hope it's not Chris Rufo because you shouldn't listen to that motherfucker. He doesn't know anything, and he's actually admitted to that. So no, don't do that. But no, school systems are not Marxist. They can't be Marxist in that regard. I I just watched a video earlier today, and it made me totally mad because someone was like, "Yeah, at Columbia, at the English literature department, I had to read Karl Marx," and I'm like, "You definitely don't read Karl Marx for an English degree. The man didn't write in English. The man didn't write on language. It doesn't make any sense." Also, local control for schools is not the best thing. You need to have some way of comparing stuff. But that's the other thing with the US education system and a lot of other education systems. The idea of standardized testing is a big problem because standardized testing leads to people um, Well, training to pass those tests, that's not education. That's training people to pass a test. So you have a number, and then you can sort people into whatever jobs people need afterwards. That's really bad, and it's something that we can see here in Europe as well, with the way that after the Bologna reforms, education has been changed in that direction as well. It's a very, very different thing. It's in fact, it's the opposite of Marxist, you might say. Britain, I agree with you. Trump's is just a symptom. The roots are way further back. They go back all the way to like the 1950s, and Birchers and those groups. You have the oh, what is it called? The Goodman Memo. It's um it's a memo from the 1960s around the Nixon administration, where the council Council for Trade is one of those industry neoliberal industry think tanks. We have that memo which talks about the fact that everything is too Marxist, and to make sure that good Americans stay true to the free market, we need to take over the education system. That's from the 60s, and that's what they did, and that's what you have now. It's not Marxist. It's very much the opposite, and there is actual paper trails for that. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah. And I'm pretty sure that Marxism is not to blame for like Oklahoma. Yes, Britain, I know that Trump doesn't represent you, and I would never insinuate that. My point was with Oklahoma is that I just read that statistic a while ago, and it is very much not tied just to like whether it's like a red state or a blue state. As I said, I think it was Tennessee that has made massive leaps in education, but by adopting a very straightforward, putting way more money and putting way more teachers into public schools, and thus giving people better, you know having more teachers that are less stressed, and investing in, once again, in public schools. And that's Tennessee, or might have been Alabama, one of those. I keep forgetting, but you know it is not tied to any party in particular, but I think Oklahoma had like specific issues. But I mean, wasn't that the weird school commissioner that was caught watching porn in his office, and stuff like that? Like, I feel like Oklahoma in particular has had a bad run when it comes to education, to the education system, and the politicians and administrators of the education system. And I mean, obviously, that's not your fault, but I think that is. Well, I mean, if the state does that, Carl, and you live in Florida, I don't know. Does that make Ron DeSantis a Marxist? Because I'm pretty sure he's not. Nope. Thornall, the Masons would not admit Trump as one of their own because, as you may remember, you need to be able to actually do geometry, and I can't see Trump do that. And that is actually true. Like, you need to do some mathematics stuff, and things to join a Masonic lodge. I can't see Trump doing that. He may have all the words and all the best words, but he doesn't have the numbers, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Jin. That's the very, very earliest Stevenson with Zodiac. That's like when he was not yet just going like, oh, I've done this one thing, and now I need to tell the rest of the world for it over thousands of pages. And yeah, I'll come up with a plot later on. Hey, Liam, how you doing, buddy? You are too late. We had a long conversation about Mormonism because I'm back in my Mormon research, and I just read a book that is really bad. It's about Mormons, and it's not good because turns out Stephen Mansfield not a good writer and a bit of a piece of shit. But I'm very happy, and I will return to more Mormon research, and I'll send you parts of the hopefully not too far in the future video Mormonism video for review and feedback. And have you read the John G. Turner biography of Joseph Smith? Because I've read his biography on Brigham Young, um, but I think the one on Joseph Smith is newer, and I think it also is a bit newer than Rough Stone Rolling. So there's that. Also, Fawn Brody's No Man Knows My History finally has an unabridged audiobook, and I'm very happy about that. Seven Eves is as how far in are you? Are you in the second part where everything is like 10,000 years in the future, or are you still somewhere in space? That's a very noble thing to do, Apollo. I do really hope you get through with that. Have you read the new August Clark book? Because I think the Felicity Complex might be something that you might enjoy. Came out a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, has interesting things to say about gender roles and stuff. The unmaking of the New Deal left, that is very depressing. I, I mean, I'm gonna read the Nerd Reich because I feel sort of like after the AI video and stuff, I kind of have to sort of like stay up to date with what's going on with the AI stuff. I think I said that last week in the video. What's it called in the weekly navel gazing? That every time I make one of those long ass videos, afterwards I feel sort of like the obligation to sort of like stay up to date what's going on with that topic. So a new Arthurian novel comes out, I'm like, I guess I kind of have to say something about that now that I've talked about it. And that's the same thing that's happening with the AI tech fascist whatever thing. Um, but yeah, I try to move to the next sort of like thing, and yeah, that's gonna be Mormons, lots of them. Well, I mean, it's called the sorrow of war. Yeah. Hey, Ori, somehow all your messages have been hidden from me until then, except for the Green Tower one. And yeah, I would have been thinking about Ted Williams as well. Well, the thing with those universities with like high endowments and so forth is that they're not about getting the degree. They're about networking, finding people to then invest in your next startup, to then get a job at someone else's law firm and so forth. It's a networking thing for to reproduce elites. That's not a leftist thing, though. That's very much the opposite of that. It's like, why do you think all of those tech fascists all come from Stanford? It's not because Stanford is super woke and leftist, right? That's not the case. It's very much the opposite. And yeah, it's those are not very politically ideologically clear schools in any way, shape, or form. If you want a leftist college, you can find one, but it's definitely not Harvard, and it's not Yale, and it's definitely not Stanford or Princeton or MIT. Britain, you're not a fascist, no. Um, yeah, Chadia, do you want a wrench? I mean, you have one. Use the wrench. Now that's a shame, Thornall. I would have loved to see that one. But O'Brien versus Trump, I mean, come on. Oh, that is good to know, Ori, about the Book of the New Sun art. I don't think centralized authority is the problem unless your centralized authority sucks. As I said, like Britain, like I think with when it comes to education, you need to have some way of guaranteeing sort of like standards. I mean, we've seen that in the past, like especially in like a Jim Crow era or whatever. Like if you don't have some way of guaranteeing like a standard over like a larger area, people will fuck that up for all kinds of petty, racist, and whatever reasons, and that's why you need some kind of control. Um, at the end of the day, I don't think I feel the problem is that if you sort of like, I mean, to be frank, I think the main problem with U.S. public schools is if you tie financing of schools to property tax, that's like the underlying problem, because that means that people in richer areas will have better schools than people in poorer areas, and that's a thing that will reproduce, right? That's the problem. It's because education is expensive. Good education is expensive. So having the people that are already rich, be able to have good education, and the people that are poor have bad education, will lead to the next generation also not having that much of a chance to become rich, to get their children good education, and so forth. You need to find a way to get everyone the same education, like the same access to the same quality of education. And as long as you don't actually solve that problem of, you know, that underlying problem, the situation will not get better, because it will just reproduce inequality that's just like baked in, no matter who's in control of the state or whatever. That's just like the underlying issue. I mean, I'm not the first person claiming that the Book of Mormon is not exactly the best written text in the world. That's my point. Is like I've learned a lot, and I've read it 3 times by now, but it's um was it chloroform in book form, is what Mark Twain called it, something like that. But what I find interesting about the whole like Book of Mormon in particular is like how little sort of the actual content of the book is relevant for anything that comes after, right? Like it's when you compare it to, say, the importance of the Bible, at least to some Christians, right? Like you talk about this specific story or this specific story, but like how much, I don't know that, right? Like you can tell me that I'm completely off, but I it doesn't feel to me like the Gallianton robbers are brought up in like everyday conversation or as an example of what to do and whatever, right? Like instead you basically go like, no, the examples are more the lives of other saints, of older saints. Like you go back and go like, well, if you want an example, you go to what Joseph Smith did in whatever situation, or what Brigham Young did, or whatever other people during that time did. In you don't look to the book, but you look to the actions of of the actual faithful, and I think that's a big difference. And I think it's an important difference. No worries, Apollo, and I hope you have a good evening. And I understand. I don't think he's a bot. He's been commenting on a couple of videos, claiming that he's a moderator for a couple of larger fantasy YouTube channels. Seems to be sort of tied to the George R. Martin uh, Song of Ice and Fire fandom in one way or another. But that's the other thing, though, Britton. Did you know that Mark Twain did, in fact, meet Brigham Young? Because he did, famously. The Gistal in his grunge phase. Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Like a lot of it seems to be more about the so. I mean, and to be fair, right? Like on the one hand, you have a lot of like very explicit historical documents of like the whole like history of the saints. Obviously, what with one of the first revelations being like, "Let there be a record made." So that makes sense. And on the other hand, this is something I guess we often also sort of like ignore, or might be a bit unfair. Is like if you read the New Testament, right, the Gospels are basically talking about Jesus all the time. Um, so, in a sense, talking about what the prophet Joseph Smith does sort of like follow in that sort of looking at the actions of the person that is sort of like bringing that new covenant, whatever you want to call it. In this case, restoring the priesthood, right? That makes sense in that regard, I think. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that you're from Seattle. I guess you can't. You can take the Gistal out of Seattle, but you can't take can't take Seattle out of the Gistal, I guess. No, I don't think you have to. I mean, guess I mean, from what I can tell, the whole like calling them Lamanites thing is something that a lot of people object to, but that kind of depends, and you don't have to do that, right? As soon as you don't do that, most people won't be offended. So I think that's more like the problem there. Hey, Ida. The early Mormons got into fights with everyone, but not that much with natives. Actually, it's more with people in Missouri and angry people who lost money in their bank and with themselves and the guys in Carthage, Illinois, and with everyone basically. Famously, even the United States when they decided to send an army to Utah to which then never actually led to anything because stuff happening. So well, then enjoy your exquisite company, Ida, and have a nice evening. Yeah, I know about the Bear River massacre. I feel like the worst, like one of the more. I mean, there's obviously a lot of stuff going on around that time, but I don't. From what I can say, from where I'm standing, from what I've read, um, the Saints did not exactly behave worse than any other group of settlers in the West during that time. So it's not in any way outstanding. I feel like blaming the Mountain Meadows massacre on the Paiutes at the time, that is bad. I mean, that's evil. But then again, that whole episode is in general like insane. Yeah, which is worthwhile a book or several. And I don't think it has ever been settled how much Brigham Young knew about it, but like the Juanita Brooks, the Mountain Meadows Massacre book E is definitely a very, very good sort of like account. It does hold up even like it's like 80 years later. No, Thornall, I haven't yet. My plan was to have like a put on the have like a poll whether we should do another one of these or not. And if everyone goes like, well, let's do that, then I'll do the same thing I did last year, which is, of course, for a moment I was going to say yesteryear. Holy shit, no. I'm going to ask for suggestions. I obviously have a couple of things where I'm like, this might be interesting. I am still very much thinking about doing the Left Behind series because it has 13 books, so it would fit perfectly, and it sounds very, very painful indeed. Jules Verne might be fun. I would have to look at like how many of them and how long they are because it's been a while since I read any of them. So let me check that. I'm sure this couldn't be hard to find out, but I suspect they're not that long, and they're definitely easy to read. Wow. Well, there's an audiobook collection that has 8 novels in it that is 62 hours long. which I guess makes them around 8 hours per book in audio. Yeah, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is like 7 hours journey to the center of the earth. Ooh, a signature performance by Tim Curry. Yeah, the mysterious island is very long. Jules Verne would definitely be possible, is what I'm saying. As I said, I'm still definitely also tempted to just go and hurt myself with Left Behind. Or progression religion is like progression fantasy. I is the next thing like basically religion RPG, or what's the next step there? I would have to look the Cat Valley Chronicles up if those are available in audio. I don't know if Mousemas Part 2 makes sense because I don't know if how many are left at this point. There's a bunch left, like maybe 10 more. What can I say, Bedivere? I'm a Catholic. Well, I'm a lapsed Catholic, but still, suffering is kind of. Well, then dehydrate some potatoes, Liam, and it was nice that you showed up. So have a good day at work, I guess. Mousemas was about Redwall, yes, indeed. I mean, I could always just go and read Warrior Cats or Animorphs or something like that. That's obviously always a possibility. It's like, and there is still the idea of like just going through the Vlad Taltosh series because there's a lot of those and they all sound pretty fun. And I have never read them. And there's Dragon Riders of Pern, which would make sense. And there's so much. So I guess I'll just ask for suggestions and then I'll pick 4 or 5 that seem doable, and then we'll have a vote on that, and then that's what we go with. But I figured if I'm working on the Mormonism video anyway, and I have to obviously also reread the Old Testament and the New Testament and Revelation and all of that apocalyptic stuff to begin with. And I read a book on apocalyptic prophecies and Mormonism. I just need to remember what it was called. Obviously, it has the Pale Horse prophecy and all that kind of stuff in it. Um, so that would already put me in like a specific frame of mind, so I could totally just do Left Behind and laugh a bit at Tim LaHaye. Did you know that Tim LaHaye was an assistant to Robert Welch, founder of the John Birch Society, and worked in the in the John Birch Society before he founded his own ministry and everything? So there's a connection to religious fascism and Left Behind. Ori, no. After the rapture, faith is no longer relevant because, on the one hand, you can't have faith because you know at that point because the whole thing has happened, and then shit's over anyway. So no, faith is no longer relevant. Ooh, The Stress of Her Regard. It has Lord Byron in it, and Percy Shelley, and others. I am not a Christian. I was baptized Catholic and I went to First Communion in a Catholic church, but I am not exactly paying attention to that. But I obviously was brought up in that context. Although German Catholicism, at least in the area that I grew up in, was very, very liberal, to put it mildly. So no, I'm just I just also spent a lot of time studying medieval history and church history. So I don't know if I wear satanic shirts. I find Satanism really, really boring and ridiculous. Obviously, I have like two or three band shirts from Pentagram, so there's that. But Pentagram's not a satanic band; they're just like insanely on drugs. Oh, you mean the Broken Swords? Oh no, you mean Three Hearts and Three Lions by Poul Anderson. That's the one that has the troll and the dwarf with the Scottish accent. You are very much allowed to ask a question about German politics, Bedivere. I don't know if I can answer it, but I will try. Sorry, Ori, that sounds weird. But yeah, Three Hearts and Three Lions, a fun story. And yes, had a huge impact on Dungeons and Dragons because it's the first time you find trolls that regenerate and can be killed by fire. And as I said, it's the first time that a dwarf has a Scottish accent, and since then, all dwarves have had Scottish accents. So there's that. Also, the dwarf loves beer. Ooh, The Dragon Waiting. I'm sure you'll love The Dragon Waiting. It's a weird book, but it's got Mithras cults and uh, Byzantine armies and dragons and stuff in England. Moby Dick is a very good book. But I do still find it very funny that what I mentioned, as I mentioned recently, like that Moby Dick is in fact, went out of print because everyone hated it, and it took like 30 years or so for someone to go like, "Hey guys, this book is actually really good," which is not what you expect from Moby Dick. except obviously for Mike at Bibliophile Reads, who thinks it's a bad book. No, no, I'm putting words in Mike's mouth. That's not true. Mike just doesn't like it. Um, I can. I'll explain it in a second, Bedivere. Okay, okay, Thornall. Um, there is this weird Finnish gothic prog whatever band called Sleep of Monsters, and they have a song. It's called "The Art of Passau." Passau being a city in Germany, and Passauer Kunst being a really weird local form of magic practiced in the 17th century, mostly during the 30 Years' War, where you draw magical symbols and mathematical formulae and stuff like that on pieces of paper, which are supposed to be protective magic. And the song is very much tied to the idea and because Passau obviously was a Roman garrison and so forth, and how there is a continuous tradition from ancient times through the Mithras cult that stayed underground and that then resurfaced as this form of 17th century protective magic. And it's also tied to Norse mythology because they're weird. So now you know, and I figured you might actually find this interesting. But if you're so the Merkel's party, that being the Christian Democratic Union, is they're a conservative party on paper. They are not nationalist in that regard. They're obviously, I would say, you could basically sort of compare them to the Democrats politically. I would say center Democrats, I guess, roughly in U.S. terms. The Christian part there. So what happened is that during the 1920s, you have like lots of parties. In the 1930s, most of them sort of like get killed off by the Nazis. You have one party that sort of survives until shortly after 1945. That is the Centrum Party or Center Party, which is a Catholic party. It certainly is very conservative, if not reactionary, and very religious. And a lot of those people end up in that Christian Democratic Union. And they are, yeah, they're Christian Democratic. Over time, they have very much sort of like left the more religious elements, the more Christian elements behind, and have turned into your basic neoliberal, somewhat conservative party in a lot of ways. They are, they're conservative, socially conservative, and a bit reactionary, but they try to mostly stay away from like active sort of like nationalism in most ways, right? They have sort of like tried that out from time to time, and our current chancellor is obviously also from that party, and he does certainly flirt with that. But I wouldn't call them Christian nationalists. And certainly, the Christian part has been damped down. Fun fact, they are in fact sort of like two parties because the Christian Democratic Union only exists in 16 out of 17 German states. It does not actually do anything actively in Bavaria. Bavaria has its sister party, the CSU, the Christian Social Union. I wouldn't call them socialists, but yeah, and they're basically the same party, just with weird Bavarian elements to it. And they certainly have leaned further right in that regard, and certainly, I mean, they're trying to be nationalistic, but they're also mostly like very patriotic about Bavaria in contrast to the rest of Germany. So there's certain contrasts there. For like hardcore nationalism, you have to go to the AfD. That's the thing. But the problem is, as always, is that your sort of neoliberal reactionary conservatives are very, very willing to uh, align themselves with outright fascists to make sure that any form of socialism or even slightly leftist, slightly progressive, or whatever policies will never happen because we can't have that, show up. Which is one of those like fascinating things where you realize that a conservative party should, in theory, be very much, about protecting the environment because it's your home country. You don't want the entire thing to go all to hell, but yeah, obviously that's not the case, and the neoliberalism has very much sort of like eaten away any other sort of like older prior convictions, and it's basically just like lower taxes, make sure that the industry gets whatever they want, and bow to the demands of the fascist right as often as possible, and that's sort of like where they are, roughly. I don't have much respect for them, is what I'm saying. Yes, Merkel was CDU. Cat. Also, hello, Cat. Um, well, Sherlock Holmes story is in fact about Mormons. Mike Bibliophile reads is the mic I meant. They're very much overstating in that regard, Bedivere. Like Christian nationalism, the way you have it in the U.S. with your your Christo-fascist whatever evangelical parts and so forth. I mean, we have a few sort of like very weird groups that are tending towards that direction, but they also end up in the AFD. The Christian in Christian Democrats is very, very toned back, like very toned back, and so is the rest. Germany in that regard in general, has a very sort of like pale and characterless sort of like major politics, right? Like both the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats they don't have like a lot of like very strong characters, like or like strong ideas. It's very much about sort of like managed decline in a lot of ways, and one is maybe building a bunch of social housing, and the other is maybe trying to bring back nuclear, and that's sort of like all they sort of like differentiate themselves with. And the Social Democrats really, really hate the leftist party, Die Linke, for historic reasons, and the Christian Democrats really, really want to work together with the AfD, but don't dare because being a Nazi still has a lot of sort of like baggage in Germany. But that's kind of where we are. I fear that with the next elections, that sort of like wall between the AfD and the Christian Democrats will fall, however, and we'll get this sort of like then we'll get our Christian nationalist, proto-fascist kind of government. That's sort of like what I'm worried about. I never played that game, Bedivere, but we had a bunch of these sort of like educational video games in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they were spread. But yeah, and the Social Democrats famously were really bad at preventing the rise of the Nazis because they refused to ally with the communists, which they should have done, because then there would have been a chance to squash the entire thing in the late 1920s and early 1930s. But too bourgeois, too bourgeois. Um, booktubers, it depends on who you mean by booktubers, but a lot of booktubers are not really booktubing, are just like dramaing and stuff like that. But it's always been that, like, the number of videos about actual, like, individual books seems to go down, except for Liam, who staunchly does nothing but that, which is great. And Britain just did a review for Small Mercies yesterday. I think I haven't watched it yet, but some stuff happens, but a lot of it is wrap ups, the usual stuff. I think I'm just waiting for Stephen Erickson to finally put out a new book so I can talk about that. But there will be the next Glenn Cook novel will come out in November, I think. So I'm excited for that. And of course, next week, new Marlon James, and new China Mieville, and I think other stuff. Yeah, the second one is Anarchists, Jin. Yes, Kat, it's very much like a relic of the past. I mean, you sometimes have people that are very sincerely religious. Who was that? Let me think. Previous sort of like administration. He was very much sort of like tied into sort of like the Lutheran Church and stuff like that. So there are still people who take that seriously, at least some point. And it's also like region, like the Rhineland is very Catholic, for example. It's like if you're a politician in Cologne or thereabouts, you'll be very Catholic, and that is part of your identity. But in general, like religion has been, like, the traditional Catholic and Lutheran Church has been very much sort of like hollowed out in a lot of ways, which unfortunately allows the more evangelical US style of religion to sort of crop up here, or cults to crop up here, which is, where we suddenly have to deal with the idea of whether conversion therapy might still be, a valid thing to do. And it was like, we never thought about, like, I thought we were all cool with that, with, just, homosexuality existing. What happened? And it's a very specific US export of a very specific type of evangelical Christianity, sort of like the Pentecostal style of Christianity, and it's really bad. Well, I'm glad you quit drinking for a while. I hope you're feeling well with it. I didn't drink during this week, and yeah, after all of these heavy metal festivals, it did feel very refreshing in a sense. Yeah, but that's like the difference, right, Jin? That, like, the US, you have had this long sort of like march through the institutions since like the 1960s from the Christian right. And one of the things that I find so fascinating, that's so frustrating, because it often gets sort of like swept under the rug, is like the very specific Christian right that became politicized in the 1960s became politicized not for religious reasons, but for racist reasons. It first was an anti desegregation movement, and once, civil rights protests and everything were successful, they were like, well, I guess we can't be too overtly racist anymore because it doesn't fly, and it makes us look bad. We need to find a different topic to sort of like take back power. And that's when they settled on anti-abortion. Like, you look at, like, several like major evangelical denominations, like the Baptists, and so forth, right? Like, they had no position on abortion whatsoever, or were pro-abortion until like the 1960s, and then they switched. And that's why you have this very specific alliance between the Catholic Church, which obviously has always been anti-abortion, and the more like right-wing or racist Southern evangelical churches, who, want something else, but figure that this alliance might work, and they ally with the Catholic Church. And they pull in the Mormons. Famously, like Utah was about to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Um, and then Phyllis Schlafly, who's one of the most evil persons of the 20th century, went to Utah and talked to the president of the Women's Relief Society, which is the like women's organization within the LDS Church, and convinced them to withdraw their support. And then Utah did not ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, and we know where that ended, which it never got passed, right? And that's where you have that very specific alliance between Mormons and Catholics and right wing evangelicals that has formed this very specific sort of like political force with the moral majority, Jerry Falwell, all of those fuckers, right? That's where that comes from, and it's an alliance that is mostly born out of racism and an opposition to segregation, to desegregation, this way around, which is something to keep in mind. It's like maybe they didn't care about abortions that much until they figured that abortions were a better way to take over power than insisting on being racist. Thornell, if you don't know about conversion therapy, you might read a book by Chuck Tingle. It's called Camp Damascus. Hello, Oso. How you doing? No, yeah, George Santos is fun. I think my new my new favorite U.S. politician is the replacement for what's his face, the closet gay guy that recently died, his sister, and her comments on whether Taiwan and the South China Sea is a is a security um, uh, security concern for the U.S. And her answer was like, "I don't know. I don't. I am not qualified." And I'm like, "Well, at least someone is honest. That's great." Lindsey Graham, what's her name? Darlene Graham. Yeah, that's that's my new favorite politician. That's like that's like top tier qualifications. Also, the idea that just if someone dies, their either spouse or sister, their next of kin take over. Is like, didn't you fight like an entire war about getting rid of like hereditary monarchies and stuff like that? But I guess whatever. No, I think there is something very specific to how racism has been baked into US policies and US law that is different from other places where, yes, everywhere is racist, obviously, but the way that US policies have been very deliberately made to exclude several groups of non-white people. That level of sort of like institutional or like legal racism, I think that is definitely stands out, I think. And the fact that it has never sort of like been sort of like talked about too much, or like there has never been like an actual reckoning, and I think that is part of the problem. No, no, Gistal and Demidrek is the same person. He just switched gods from Drek to male, and you have not read Malazan long enough to find out why that makes a difference. That is so funny, Kat. That is, yeah. That whole like interview snippet. That is so fucking hilariously funny. It's like, but like the same way, like I like how Donald Trump right now is probably he's doing more praxis than any like leftist agitator, leftist activist has done in a long time. He's um the whole like let's replace the modern sort of like starting system catapults for on our like aircraft carriers. Let's replace that with like old school steam catapults. Also, let's put the control tower in the middle of the of the ship and not like in the back. It's like finally someone is actively doing something to deteriorate US military capacity, and yeah, good on that man. Comrade Trump coming through once again. I mean, that's like the other thing with racism, right? Britain's like every country is uniquely racist because, like, the problem is sort of like US cultural hegemony, especially through social media and stuff like that. Is like the very specific stuff that comes through, the history of chattel slavery, Jim Crow, Chinese Exclusion Act, all of that kind of stuff is very, very different from the type of racism that we have, say, in Germany, right? The main sort of like racism you have in Germany is against people from either like Eastern Europe or the Middle East, because Turkey in particular, or people that are sort of like lumped into that, because that's the people that historically have come here as migrants, as migrant workers, or are just neighbors and so forth. Yes, there are, obviously also like people with very, black. There are black people in Germany, but not that many because we genocided all the ones that we found in the colonies that we had down there in the south and so forth. But so the racism is different, and it is not as sort of like baked into the legal system because a lot of it happened, like a lot of like the migration stuff happened after the new German after 45 basically, or 49, once we built ourselves a new code of law, so to speak. So there is that. I didn't know about the lynching part. That I didn't notice, but I mean racial murder is still a thing. Yeah, that is also true, Jin. Slavery never went away. You just like turned it into you made it available to all incarcerated people. Let's put it that way. which are still, mostly proportionally mostly black people. So yeah, it never went away. I mean, to be fair, like hating Roma people is a universal thing in like the entire world, I guess. They're like it's really really harsh, like how much hatred there is for like Romani people. That's really bad. Yeah, exactly. Like cat. That's like the thing. Like I like when I talk to people, it's one of those words that has made it like into like all of the like Balkan languages where people talk. They yeah they always use the German word Gastarbeiter, like guest worker, because obviously they go back. It's like you know obviously they don't go back home because why would they? Um, Volcatronic, first of all, thanks for becoming a member. That's fucking amazing. Also, this means we have like two Romanians in the chat now. That is, I guess, a very impressive number in this regard. I don't know if it's stronger in Romania, but like, trust me, there's a lot of like hatred towards Romani people in Bulgaria and in Croatia and Serbia as well. But you know, I don't think it's it's not a competition, or it shouldn't be. Um, yeah, yeah, that is true. I mean, wasn't it like a couple of years ago where you had the Texas Border Patrol or whatever guys on horseback whipping migrants? I remember there was like a big scandal about that, which is insane. I mean, reverting to steam catapults, building battleships, reopening Alcatraz. Um, some people really try to turn the clock back to some place that you know probably never existed, but you still get all the bad parts. What was I going to say? Like, but yeah, on the slavery and like, especially when it comes to like prison labor, that is still like a massive thing. And I'm not just saying that because I recently, well, earlier today, listened to the whole like this "It Could Happen Here" collection from this week podcast, and they had like an entire thing on how to organize, because of the Union for Prison Labor and stuff like that. Was really interesting, very depressing. Highly recommend that if you want to get really angry at the prison system, which you should be. Just to put it, really helps. But they're planning like a huge prison strike next year in June. Um, so there's something to look forward to, and if you know how to support, prison, like support people who are forced to do prison labor for basically nothing. Obviously the famous ones are the California's prison firefighters, which is still one of the most insane things to exist. Like that you take people, take prisoners and force them to work as firefighters, and once they get out of prison, because they obviously have like a criminal record, they're not allowed to work as firefighters afterwards, but you pay them like, I don't know, cents per hour while they, risk their lives, saving fucking LA or whatever, right? It's insane. It is basically slavery. Because obviously, at the same time, if you refuse to work as an incarcerated person, you do in fact get punished for that. So, how is that different from slavery? So yeah, now you know. Thanks, Thornall. I remember I made that video, but I have no idea what I said in that one. But there's lots of reasons to read Malazan. I sometimes wonder about this because there's sometimes you read books and you're like, well, this is very clearly made for me, and that was definitely the case for me with Malazan because I had already read the Black Company novels at the time, and everyone was like, well, if you like the Black Company, you really would love Malazan. I was like, well, I wish there were audiobooks, and then the audiobooks came out, and I started listening to Gardens of the Moon, and was like, yeah, yeah, obviously this is very much made for me, and yeah, it has stayed that way, and I sure hope that it won't be too long for the next one. Yeah, it is cool. It has dinosaurs with swords that shoot lasers and stuff. I don't know how it could get much cooler than that. I mean, maybe if they would also ride motorcycles, but at that point we would get into like Chuck Tingle territory, I guess. Bam. And that's like a thing. Like earlier this year, when Britain was reading Gardens of the Moon, and we had like a conversation about it, I reread Gardens of the Moon. I was so tempted to just like jump back in and go like, go back through the entire thing yet again, and then I, um, you know, decided that it would be better if I would first, finish the AI video. And houses that eat people. That is also true. Ooh, speaking of that guy, John Gwynne has a new novel coming out as well, later this year. But I already forgot. It's something Slavic mythology, history, whatever. Found family, and I'm sure someone will be very angry, and you'll get like very long and detailed descriptions of combat, and uh, possibly tossed in a couple of words from some Slavic language for weapons, so it sounds authentic and shit. That does sound like a very, very interesting book, Kat. That sounds like the kind of book I would be very interested in reading. I'll see if I can get a handle on that one because I don't know if I've spoken about like when I studied history at university. For history at my university, having Latin is a prerequisite. So you can either have like the Latinum, which is like the Latin exam for Germany, right? Like you can either do that at high school, or you have to do it until the second year of your bachelor's degree. You have to do the Latin thing, and there is one course where you have to do Latin stuff in history. No matter which degree of history you want to do, if you want to focus on contemporary history or modern history or whatever, you still have to do the Latin thing, which I think is good. And I did my Latin at high school, and then I spent one semester translating the Tacitus Germania. So I spent an entire semester, and the professor doing that course was not like a history professor from like a professor from the history department, but from the Latin studies department. So he was very excited about Asian stuff, and we never talked about any of the context. We just like hardcore translated that fucking book for one semester, and that has traumatized me. It's, I mean, to be fair, it could have been much worse. Like the semester prior to that, they did the Lombard histories by what's his name, Paul. Is it Paul Diaconus? Might be. I think it's Paul the Deacon. And the year after, they did some early Renaissance Latin text, and compared to that, Tacitus is very, very, readable and translatable. It could have been last year. I don't know. Time is weird, and I don't know what was when. In my head, it was like January or February, but Okay, then my time is not completely off, because I figured we talked about it like in January or February or sometime around that. Ooh, now that sounds painful. I would not want to read the Agricola. That is true, Thor. Wait, which Summa? You mean Thomas Aquinas? I have not read the entirety of the Summa Theologica by Thomas Aquinas. I like to torture myself, but I don't like to torture myself that much. Um, so no, I have not read the entirety of that. I have read excerpts in philosophy, the philosophy courses, but I have not read the entirety of that. Korab is true, but Korab is so much fun. Has anyone ever counted how many swords he destroys during that series? Um, Also, I think a ton of like medieval monks have read the entirety of that text. It's just not like, it's there is that problem that you have with what's I'm looking for a term here, that a combinatoric explosion, right? Um, it's the kind of thing that happens when you do artificial intelligence, and if you do a symbolic AI, and you need for like every exception, you need to hard code every single exception, and the Summa is sort of like the theological equivalent to that, because like you go through every single fucking thing in exhausting detail, and every exception needs to be worked through, and it's exhausting. It's impressive, but it's not necessarily something I would read, because I don't do medieval Catholic theology. That's not my job. Like it's like if you do that for you know work, then sure. Isn't that so? Wait. Let me think. Umberto Eco might have. I think, like, if I remember, his PhD thesis was on Aquinas aesthetics, but might be confusing that. So I would have to look that up. But I think he worked on Aquinas aesthetics. Nope, they didn't play that much Fortnite. That's like when I was in Malta and I went to the Hypogeum, which is incredibly impressive, and you see all of these also like Hajakim and Megara or whatever it's called, the other ones. You see all of these temples, and you're like, well, that's what people were capable of when we didn't have Netflix or video games, because there was fuck all to do except pile rocks or dig rocks, and yeah, we have lost that. I don't know. My bedtime reading currently is Jingo by Terry Pratchett, which is good. It has important wisdom like give a man a fire and he's warm for a day, set him on fire and he's warm for the rest of his life. It's one of those things that I don't know, I have taken to heart. But yeah, I look into that Tacitus book, Cat, because it sounds very interesting. Because it sort of like the rediscovery of the Germania has had like a huge impact on sort of like the sort of like construction of a German identity in a lot of ways. So there is something there, because German as an identity is something that was like constructed fairly recently. It's like you rediscover the Germania, you start building stuff around that, then fucking Herder comes along and starts talking about language and stuff like that, and then the Brothers Grimm show up and study in Marburg and hate it, and then they move over to fucking Kassel and wherever else they go and do stuff, and then Richard Wagner, and then Nazis. That's roughly how how German identity sort of like evolves. There's more to it, but that's basically it. It's like Anya, Herder comes up with like stuff around language, and the Grimms smoke too much, I guess. Exactly, Thornall. Exactly. If you have 8 seasons of Richardson, no one builds a pyramid, and that's that's why we can be happy that back in the day, during the building of the pyramids, Egypt didn't have access to NordVPN, and they couldn't watch Bridgerton in British TV. I guess. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Also, it's like you dig too deep into like nonfiction reading, news, politics, whatever. Like sometimes you just need to kick back and read something that is not that. I still need to record that fucking video about The Intrigue by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which is an amazing book about something that I didn't know before that I was interested in, but that's like the Silvia Moreno Garcia phenomenon. It's like she writes a book about something where I'm like, why would I ever want to read about wedding scammers in 1930s Mexico, rural Mexico at that? Turns out, yes, I wanted to read about that. And it took me about like half a chapter to find out. That is true, Thornall. You need to remember the way of Mrs. Cosmopolite. That is also true. It's blue from the outside. The sound of one ant clapping is cl because the other one makes the app. Oh man, I need to reread that one. Soul Music, such a good book. So many really stupid rock and roll jokes in that one. Plus, Born to Ruin is still one of the best patches I've ever sort of like seen, or in this case, read described as someone that as something that a rock person could put on their, in this case, a wizard could put on their leather vest rune. Yeah, but that's the thing, Kat. It is really good, but it's not something that where I was like, well, this is clearly a book written for me. Like I'm, but they make like all of these things be very interesting, and I'm obviously very easily drawn into something and go like, well, this is super interesting, and now I learn a lot about different sort of like class systems and gender roles and class roles and elitism, even though the revolution has happened and the people that sort of like were left over, former aristocrats after the revolution, how you still try to keep sort of like standards up now, how that makes you uniquely vulnerable to vetting scammers in this situation, or on the other hand, how it makes you also very formidable in not giving in because you're understanding of what's going on. It's a fantastic book. Read The Intrigue by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It's all about a guy who goes to Veracruz and comes back with the wrong woman or something like that. It's really good. Also, people die. Yeah, Thornall. That's like the other thing that like Discworld is so incredibly quotable. I just recently was thinking about that when not necessarily earlier when we're talking about it, when people talked about Marxism without knowing what it is, but there's this thing, I think it's in Guards when he talks about like how books are dangerous, and it's like, not just magic books, all books are dangerous. Someone sits in a museum and writes a harmless treatise about economic history, and years later someone is organizing a mass shooting, and I'm like, well, yeah, kind of, right? Which one is the one about supernatural Nazis? That's the it's one of the vampire books, right? I think my former flatmate just read that and told me about it, but I forgot the title. I think I really want to read Silver Nitrate because that sounds really fascinating. Weird Mexican B movie horror movies. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Silver Nitrate is the one about the B movies. It might also have Nazis in it. But yeah, The Intrigue, very interesting book. Nothing supernatural in it, just a straight up sort of like noir wedding scammer novel. It's the kind of novel you're reading, you're like, this should be a movie, and it has to be in black and white. It's not something you could film in color. Okay, so Silver Nitrate is the thing is like Silvia Morena Garcia has like more than one novel that has vampires, so that's that's kind of the problem there, or not the problem. Yeah. Okay, silver nitrate is the one about the Nazi occultist stuff. Then I guess that's the next one I'm going to. Because yeah, who doesn't love them some like Nazi occultists? Certain Dark Things. Yeah, that's the one that my former flatmate recently read. Yeah, I read The Seventh Whale of Salome, The Bewitching, and The Intrigue. And The Bewitching does not officially have vampires, but it has witches. Those witches do still suck blood, so there's that. I also love like there's so many weird like in jokes in the in the Bewitching because you know it's at the university somewhere in New England, and there's obviously a street she has to walk along, which is called Pigman's Alley, and she's in the library, and in the library there's all the portraits of like the former deans of the English department, the literature department, and so forth, and one of them is Stephen Graham Jones, and there's so many in jokes in there, which is you know fun. Stifford, I've known about that one. I have not read it. I think it's the author name. D- People that like authors that have just like one name that is probably very clearly a pseudonym. I don't know. I find this weird because usually those people write lit RPGs, and I know that's not the case with the Brom, but you know, it's the kind of thing I struggle with. I have not watched Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think you might really like The Bewitching card. It's because it has this sort of like dark academia thing to it, and it also very much talks about sort of like the main character sort of like being under like a lot of academic pressure, trying to finish her PhD, dealing with you know at least some aspects of neurodivergence, and then Mexican witches, which suck blood, which is important. It does sound disturbing. I'll give you that. Um, so yeah, I guess like I need to figure out which fiction book to read next because all the stuff that I mentioned is all the nonfiction stuff, and I when I just said like it's important to from time to time read like a nonfiction read like a fiction book, I should probably find something between the Nerd Reich and the Jakarta method to sort of lighten the mood. But I still have the Everlasting and what's it called? The Republic of Memory. Um, although that one annoys me. I think I've read some Conan, some non-Howard Conan back in the day. I just don't know by whom it was, and it didn't work too well because it did lack sort of like that weird sort of like that sort of like visceral sort of like insecurity masked by rage incel thing that makes Howard so powerful. Um, I would probably just because of wanting to punish myself, I would probably, for sheer interest, try to read one of the Robert Jordan Conan stories just to find out how badly he misunderstands Conan. But beyond that, I don't know. No, no, I'm sure it's a great movie, and I'm sure I'd love it. It's more like having finding the time and situation because obviously, if I want to watch that kind of movie, I would probably have to watch it probably with my flatmate or someone else because I would probably need someone to explain stuff on the screen. So it's more like a scheduling thing than anything else. Yeah, exactly, Kat. I could always read the Everlasting. About the Republic of Memory. It's the first one in the series, and I didn't know that when I bought it. And I was like, "Wow, a standalone!" And now it's not a standalone. Now I'm annoyed without having started it. So it's a very minor sort of like thing, and I still assume the book is good. I was just like, I was promised a standalone, and now it's not. I have not also, but since I have found a way to access the region locked US stuff, I the money and stuff to actually go to it. But yes, I have the chance to go and read Max Gladstone, which I know I should. It's I'm even subscribed to his newsletter. That's like the worst. Like when we had like the big heat wave, like in June, when it was like 40, 41, 42 degrees or whatever, and it doesn't cool down. That's so brutal. That does very much sound really good because I really loved 10 Incarnations of a Rebellion. Of Rebellion, I did really really love her in one from this year. The We Dance Upon Demons, about about abortion clinics and the fight for you know women's bodily autonomy. That was a really good book, a very angry one, and yeah, I think I think I'll put that one on my list of stuff to look forward to in 2027 because hell yeah. Also, Cameron Hurley has a new book coming out 2027. That is good because it's been way too long since the last Cameron Hurley novel. Did you actually get around to reading 10 Incarnations of Rebellion, Kat? I know you wanted to, and I think you got it from like or ordered it, pre-ordered it, or whatever at the bookstore, and then I went and slept on like very dusty fields for like over a month and kind of lost track of like what people were reading. Ah, here we go. Oh yeah, but also I'm sure I will love his work. Like as I said, like I've been reading his newsletter for at least a year at this point, and I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that I would appreciate. He does mention people like David Graeber suspiciously often. The heat wave was fucking insane everywhere. Like Europe was like, as I said, like France and Hungary and a couple of other countries had to shut down their nuclear reactors because they were running out of cooling water for them. Because the water levels, groundwater and rivers and so forth, were like super low. They had to stop. They had to stop river transport on the Rhine River. Like it was really bad. And I mean, it's been raining this week, but that's about it. We'll see how long it lasts. But speaking about politics and our maybe not Christian nationalist, but still fucked up Christian Democratic Union Party. Um, One of their politicians said that they would not touch the climate change topic because that would only give votes to the Green Party, so they're not talking about it. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's time to do some direct action at this point. I think. Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't have to squeeze it in. But you did buy the book, I think, right? So you can actually read it whenever you have time. So that's you're not relying on your library to have it available or anything of the sort. So that's good. Yeah, but if you that's the problem, right? Like, how stupid can you be? It's like, well, we're not talking about this because it would only help the Greens. Like, no, you can just go like, hey, look, it's too hot for everyone. We should probably do something about it. It's like, but isn't Wiener supposed to be like really both like hot and wet? And it was just like very dry hot. It was like super fucking you know, not very damp. Venus is supposed to be full of jungles and dinosaurs and shit. I've read my Pulp Fiction stories. Yes, Bedivere, it would probably take sail the wind out of the sails of the Greens, but remember what I said earlier that they're like being basically hollowed out by neoliberalism. That's kind of the result of that. Yes, also it will get worse. That's kind of the point, and yeah, okay, yeah, I can see that cat. That makes sense. Um, yeah, I mean, so climate change is a big problem, and the building of data centers in especially poor regions which suffer from the climate change thing already is exacerbating the things. Like building data centers in fucking Arizona, right? Like famously, Arizona is built on a swamp, and clearly it makes sense to build something there that needs a lot of like fresh water. That yeah, no, it's making things worse. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Puerto Rico is really fucked right now. It's brutal. Mars doesn't have dinosaurs, I think. I like okay, on the one hand, like pulp Mars stuff is really cool. I highly recommend reading Desolation Road and Aries Express by Ian MacDonald for like really fun Mars stuff. um, but that's the other thing. Like read Adam Becker's More Everything Forever. It's a really good book, and his podcast is excellent. Like he has a podcast, Dreaming Against the Machine, and he's got like Becky Chambers. He had Becky Chambers on. He had what's her name? Isabella something. I keep forgetting her name. Who wrote the Why Don't We Kill the Child in the Omelette Hole? He's he's got all the cool people on his podcast. Lots of sci-fi authors talking about sci-fi stuff, and lots of. I feel like most of the people he's had on his podcast are sources in my AI video. He's got Safia Noble on, who did the Algorithms of Oppression book, and he's got Kathy O'Neill, who did Weapons of Math Destruction on it, and he's got Quinn Sabodian and Ben Tarnoff, who did Muskism, and yeah, Becky Chambers, and so forth. It's really cool. Highly recommend that. It's fun. Also, uh, his executive producer is his cat, and apparently the Patreon that you could subscribe to, which I haven't because I have no money, um, has a dedicated stream of cat pictures. So, you know, Adam Becker, cool guy. I mean, that's the thing, Bedivere, right? Like something will have to give because globally, because the rest of the world is building out renewables and everything is electrifying everything. It's like, and that stuff is getting cheaper right now with like gas prices. I have friends who are doing car stuff. People that I know work for Volkswagen and stuff like that. Like, and they're all switching to electric because it's cheaper. Like, it's so much cheaper right now to have an electric car if you have a chance to recharge every, like, I don't know, 100 miles or whatever. It's like, why would you pay, gas in Germany right now is like, I don't know, two something per liter. If you can just like charge the thing, and if you have, depending on where you are, a lot of like the public sector, state administration and stuff like that, those people, those organizations offer like free recharging for electric vehicles and stuff like this. It's like, why would you? And at some point that will sort of like really really bite the US in the ass. So like whoever comes next will have to do something about it because the economics make less and less and less sense. And you know I somehow doubt that the Strait of Hormuz will become US territory anytime soon, despite what fucking Trump makes his girlfriend post at like 3 in the morning or whatever, right? So it will happen. Canals, dying cities. That do you want that for Mars or for the US? Because I think you might get it. Well, good night, Kat. And yes, nice that you showed up. I very much appreciate that. That is also true. Barsoom might be another one that could be done. I've only ever read like 2 or 3 of those, and there's a lot of them. I don't know how many there are, but I have not, because I don't have a lawn, so I don't need that stuff. I'm not saying that like there's no use for gas, right? Like that's not the point, but there's a lot of stuff where using renewables does just like make economic sense at this point because stuff has gotten so fucking cheap. And and that's like beyond like any climate things like you know, do the cheap thing. There's at least 7 of the Barsoom stories. A Princess of Mars is the first one. But yeah, Barsoom might be worth exploring for the Christmas thing. Yeah, the network state thing is so ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I I don't think like the Greenland thing will happen anytime soon. I suspect, like, because it is stupid, right? Like, the US has so much control over Greenland already just by, for economic reasons and so forth. So it's like, it's just because Trump wants to plant a flag there, and I guess the people that actually have to make the decisions and shit like that will probably just like pry his fingers away from any buttons and go like, well, no, fuck you. We already have all the stuff that we want. We can. I mean, back there. I've read Princess of Mars and the second one, whichever that one is, and it's a thing. It's interesting. It's very there's a lot of like very unsavory uh politics in the Barsoom stuff because Burroughs very sort of like very 19th century southerner. Let's put it that way. I keep forgetting that, but like, isn't John Carter like I think he's like a Confederate like veteran and not a he's not one of the good guys. Well, he's obviously like a gentleman hero and all of that. So there's a lot of like Reconstruction bullshit going on there. Well, not Reconstruction, but like he's unpopular and incompetent. So that both of that helps. And like that's like one of the good things, so to speak, of like a lot of the current sort of like right wing sort of like rise of the far right in Europe and the US is like all of them are insanely incompetent. Like a lot of them, like the whole like Nigel Farage versus Count Binface things, like the same things. Like that's incompetence to the nth degree, and you can see the same with the German like far right. Like they're a lot of the people when it comes down to actually doing stuff, they're very very incompetent, which does help. Unfortunately, France, Rassemblement National does seem less incompetent, and we've seen how far Viktor Orban could take this whole thing in Hungary, and Giorgia Meloni is certainly not out of power. So it really depends, but at least some of the key players seem to be incredibly incompetent, which helps. Well, I can tell you how Lord of the Rings ends. Frodo dies, sort of. Yeah, but if you're no, no, obviously he's not agreeing. He's not acting in the U.S. In like a U.S. interest. I just my thought was more that like I assume that when it comes to that, like that the people that do actually, have like very specific economic interests that Trump Trump's ego interests will prevent him from doing something this stupid. But then again, no one stopped him from doing the whole thing with Iran, and we'll see how that how that continues going. See, I remembered that like he's a Confederate. Yeah, Britain. I mean, come on, of course. Like Trump's specific approach to global politics and foreign policy has certainly, let's put it that way, not strengthened the US's hegemonic position, right? Like the whole fuck up with like South Korea. That's like stupid. Going like, well, I guess we'll just like bomb the shit out of Oman. It's like, yeah, good idea. So now you're threatening the other side of the Strait of Hormuz. How do you think that will go down? Yeah, I agree with you. Also, I think this will be over by 2028. Like Trump specifically will be over by 2028. The rest, who knows? But like Trump, I I can't see him making it that far. I didn't know about the eagle, but that's insane. That's fucking insane. Well, I'll say this: when it comes to the whole like nuclear weapons, and we have more powerful technology and whatnot, even if that were true, we're talking about a president who has just decided that the way better sort of like electromagnetic catapults for aircraft carriers are to be replaced by steam catapults because they're cooler and older. Do you think that even if there was a more powerful weapon than nuclear weapons, Trump wouldn't go for the nukes because they make much more pretty, much prettier explosions? Okay, that technology is called weed and psychedelics, and we've had that for a long time. Sorry, it's probably one of my favorite like Futurama jokes when they go when in that episode where Bender is playing washboard for Beck, and and the rest is like taking that old bus to follow them, and it's like, so where's the device to speed up and slow down time? And it just like grabs under the seat and pulls out the bong, and it's like, well, here. Anyway, to not stay too much on like the US politics, because like that's like the other things, like there's nothing you can do. This man is insane, like functionally insane. Trying to guess whatever the fuck he will do is like maybe he'll just like stay at home and build his fucking ballroom and be happy or whatever, right? Like, who knows? It could be anything, and it doesn't make any sense to worry about it, obviously. But there's nothing you can do. That's like the frustrating part. I don't know about destroying the dollar. Maybe some people. I mean, that's like the fascinating part is that you have like all of these very different sort of like interests, sort of like all tied into this very non-existing coalition with like this insane guy at the top, right? Like you have like your Peter Thiel network staked, wow, words, network state, techno fascists who basically want to dismantle the state and do whatever the fuck they want to do with that. And then you have your Christo fascist sort of people that want to turn the US into like a white theocracy, and then you have some people that just want to cut taxes and shit like that. And it's like there is no underlying sort of project, that sort of underlying ideology that ties all of that together beyond let's just like fuck up everything. So that's what they're doing. Oh yeah, right. There was something. I haven't read it yet. I haven't. I saw like a headline on the JD Vance thing. I mean, let him try. it it's just like so interesting in like how it's sort of like all self-inflicted. That's like the fascinating part for me. But then again, right? Like if they destroy the US dollar, so who's going to bail out Argentina next time around? And Peter Thiel is living in Argentina now, so who's going to save his ass? Well, according to his boss, JD Vance is not the Antichrist. The candidate is Greta Thunberg. Britain, because of sheer opportunism. That certainly is part of it, yes, also. I mean, it's not like people own that much to begin with, right? So whatever, right? That is true. That is true, Thornall. She can't be the Antichrist because of that. But then again, Peter Thiel recently also said that the Pope is clearly an agent for the CCP, and that one also kind of stumped me. Nope. Uh, I'm sorry. It doesn't specify gender when it comes to the Antichrist in Revelations. That's just you assuming something. No one, Britain, and I'm sorry to say this, Britain, I know you're not a fascist, but no one should ever be sympathetic to fucking Javier Milei. Man is a piece of shit, doesn't understand anything about economics or anything else. Like, why do you think the fucking US had to spend like all your tax money to bail out his failed, economic project? Because it doesn't work. Also, yeah, he's a piece of shit. Never be sympathetic to that kind of person. Seriously, you call yourself a liberal? You're not. If you think that Millet has anything to do with liberalism, you need to rethink your liberalism, motherfucker. Like seriously, no way. I mean, okay, but if you're like that's like the thing that is interesting with like popes in general, right? Is like and I've had that in the past where people like atheists go like, no, no, I could totally beat the Pope in like in a in a debate, and I'm like, no, you can't. Like anyone who makes it to the job of Pope has gone through so many fucking layers of education, of studying, of debates, of like, like those kind of people tend to be fairly smart, even when they're evil and you disagree with them, like with our German Nazi Pope, right? Like that guy was still fucking intelligent. That's and very well versed in communication and stuff like that. That's kind of comes with the job. Because unlike say U.S. presidents, you actually have to work your way up to that whole thing. Like meritocracy is alive. It just is only in the Catholic Church, I guess. Libertarian, yeah. All right, see ya and have fun at the dog park. Well, I mean, to be fair, Whigs believed in like the ongoing progress of history and that everything will turn out well. So there's that. But yeah, it's complex. But like Millet is not a liberal. He's like an anarcho-capitalist. He's an idiot. Anarcho-capitalism is basically, hey, anarcho-capitalism is the ideology for 15-year-olds who feel misunderstood and billionaires who can get away with everything. And no one else would ever espouse that kind of ideology because it doesn't work unless you already have like an army that defends you. And why would they? Yeah, yeah. I mean, the lightning thing is, well, maybe you should get some of those ice gloves, right? That might help. Anyway, Anyways, guys, it's getting somewhat later, and as I said at the beginning, I'm pretty tired, and my beer is almost empty. So maybe it's time to slowly end this, and we'll see what happens. I'll try to have some videos happening in the next couple of days, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to go back and read more Mormon stuff, and I just realized, like, if I do the whole like fucking Sanderson project that, as I said, I wanted to do, right? Like, it's that's almost like a fucking like lecture series at that point, right? Like going like Introduction to Mormonism, Elantris, then like three fucking books on Mistborn, then like Warbreaker, then another four books on Mistborn, and then like five books on Stormlight, and then here's why all of this is like fucking capitalism after all. I should start like a fucking university. The Bible is worth reading. There's fun stuff in there, including divine building codes. Build a parapet around the roof so no one falls off and brings blood on your house. Tell that to all the God-fearing Christians who really hate like building codes. It's already in Deuteronomy. Make your buildings safe. Anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I hope you had fun, despite the uh, guy at the beginning. I know I'm sometimes bad at being bringing down the hammer earlier. I probably should have done that. I tried, to reason stuff out. Seems that was a bad idea. So I want to apologize for that. And yeah, I'll see you around.